Hello and welcome to Titanic Legacy, a creative collaboration between the Titanic Book Club and Cove Pod, the Carganilla online variety entertainment podcast. Titanic Legacy podcast explores Titanic's long-lasting impact through conversations with today's creators, authors, artists, historians, filmmakers, experts, entrepreneurs, and more, who continue to produce creative work inspired by the Ship of Dreams. If you're tuning in at home while you're doing chores, driving to work, at the gym, working out on your run or your walk, however you're listening, thank you so much for giving us your time and welcoming us into your lives for the next half hour or so as we talk about Titanic and her long-lasting creative inspiration and impact. This is Titanic Legacy, the podcast. I am your host, Paul Carganilla, and today I have the pleasure of introducing you all to speaking with award-winning pencil artist Greg DiNapolie. But before we bring him aboard, I'll tell you a little bit about Mr. DiNapoli. He is best known for his highly realistic drawings of historic architecture in the medium of graphite. He has a growing following on social media, over 20,000 followers, and his videos have received over 1 million views. He has been featured in publications such as Artist Magazine, Creative Quarterly Journal, and Architecture in Perspective, a yearly journal honoring excellence in rendering by the American Society of Architectural Illustrators. Say that 5 times fast. He has also been recognized in multiple international art competitions. Greg's goal is to keep historic architecture alive through his drawings. I love that, and that's what we're all about, keeping the legacy going. Creating texture is one of the utmost importance, as every blemish, he says, every stain or jagged edge of the stone tells a story of the subject's life. With incredible care and commitment, he studies how light interacts with each subject, and with varying pencil strokes and painstaking attention to value contrast, he attempts to create texture that lift the subject off the paper and bring it to life. It is Greg's hope that through his fine level of detail, which we'll introduce you to, the viewer sees the beauty of the forgotten or commonplace buildings and ships we take for granted today. Now, if you're listening to the audio podcast, I do encourage you, once you're done listening, check out his website, GregDiNapoliIllustration.com. Follow him on Instagram, Greg DiNapoli Art, to see everything we're talking about, or find this video on the Titanic Book Club YouTube channel, as this is going to be a very visual episode, but an entertaining conversation to listen to nonetheless, I'm sure. And with all of this said, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to Titanic Legacy podcast, Greg DiNapoli.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so thrilled you could join us. I'll just tell everyone right off the bat, this is the first time we've ever spoken, but we've been in contact. I've been a fan of your work since you were featured on the Titanic Talk podcast with Nelson and Alexandra, and I reached out as this Titanic community is so welcoming, and in the world of social media, such warm embraces pretty much everywhere you turn. You were so kind to make some time for us today to talk about your inspiration and your work, and I'm so thrilled that you're here.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm usually behind the time on everyone I'm talking to over here in Southern California, but where are you joining us from?
I am from Central New Jersey, right about, 15 minutes from the famed Jersey Shore. So
wonderful. Well,
opposite ends of the country.
Yes, thanks to technology, we can sit down and have a conversation and share it with anyone who wants to hear it at any point in time in the future. But let's rewind it to the past and talk about Greg DiNapoli. First, let's talk about your what led you to this lifetime of illustration. Do you remember when you first fell in love with drawing?
Well, I always drew as a kid. I was always doodling in notebooks and stuff like that. But the level I brought it to now really is only about 10 or so years when I started taking it, much more seriously.
Wow. So. And what brought that on?
I don't know. I guess I'd always drawn, like I said, I drew in high school, and I'm a graphic designer, so I went to college for graphic design. So I always drew here and there, but I guess after my daughter was born and, working, I just kind of wanted something to like a nice therapy type of thing. And I just started messing around one day and I got a lot of compliments on what I had done. And I said, this is kind of fun. Why don't I see how far I can take this? Because I've always enjoyed it. So just through pretty much self-taught. I mean, I went to college for art, but I like to say that I'm self-taught because I didn't really take this more seriously till somewhat recently. And through just watching people on Instagram or other websites, YouTube, whatever, I just kind of kept practicing and just wanted to see how far I could take it.
So professionally, you're a graphic designer. What that's kind of a
Correct.
broad spectrum. Is there anything you specialize in?
I do like logos and stuff like that. A lot of point of purchase design, stuff. I work for a promotional products company, but we do a lot of marketing and creative stuff. So it's fun. I get to do that. But it's also like very client driven, obviously. So I don't always get to make all the decisions. So when I sit down with my pencil, it's everything is my thought and how I want it to be. So it's kind of like my escape a little bit from the day job.
Mm.
So
I found that so when I was earlier in my professional career, I was making independent movies, writing my own scripts, directing, producing, editing my own stuff. And at one point, I considered turning professional, if you will. And I tried my hand at doing some wedding videography. And I
mhm,
quickly discovered that it's a lot different when you're making something for a client than when you're doing your own life's heart's fire work.
right,
And
100%.
so that's great that you have this escape that, it's a goal that a lot of people strive for is obviously being able to do what you love and get paid for it. But there
Right.
is a difference when you're doing that for a client, like as you say, and when you're doing it for yourself. You mentioned making designing logos and stuff. I'm actually wearing some Greg DiNapoli artwork myself on this Unsinkable podcast T-shirt. And how did you get in touch with LA Beatles?
I'm a big fan. I love her podcast. I've been listening to it for quite a while. And at the end of one of her episodes, she said she was looking for new designs for, like, I think it was her season 2 or 3. So I just reached out. I'm like, hey, I could put together a couple designs for you, and I did. And she loved them, and that was that. She really she's so nice and great to talk and deal with. And I love her work. So I was honored that she chose my design for her shirt.
Well, we'll have to talk about a Titanic Legacy podcast T-shirt
There you
coming up.
go.
So transitioning then to Titanic, what sparked your interest in Titanic? When did that happen in your life?
Well, as a kid, I had a mother who loved lighthouses, and I always liked them too for as long as I can remember. And my dad would be a good sport, and he would take us to some, and my mom would take me to some. And I always was just enthralled with like big architecture. A lot of lighthouses are tall, and I thought they were so cool, and they were so old. And then I got into like living not too far from New York City. I got into skyscrapers and everything. So again, the whole size, huge architecture. How did they do that? How can they build things so big? And then like a lot of people that I'm finding listening to all the Titanic podcasts out there around fourth grade, which is like odd because a lot of people say the same grade around my age. Fourth grade, I took a book exploring the Titanic out of the library. I have it right here by Robert Ballard, and I just became like obsessed. Like the ship was so big, how could an iceberg sink it in 2 hours? Look how beautiful it was inside, and I just became. It just kind of fed my love for big architecture, and I just by fifth grade I was boring all my classmates with like absurd Titanic facts and everything, and it's become a lifelong interest of mine. I've never I had college years and everything maybe you come a little bit less interested in it, but it never left me. And now as an adult, I'm still very into it, probably as much now as I was as a kid.
It's the question all podcasters ask each other and our guests, but what do you think it is about the ship that draws people in?
I think it's like the perfect, not because there were so many movies, but it's like the perfect story, the perfect movie, but it happened for real. And it's really crazy to think about, like the decisions people made, and like it's just like a Greek tragedy that actually happened. It's just fascinating. There's so many aspects about it. The construction of the ship, how safe it was supposed to be, the wealth, the less fortunate that were on the ship. It's got everything, and it's literally. I mean, it's horrible because so many people passed away, but it's literally like the perfect story, and it actually happened. And I think that's just a fascinating thing.
Was talking to in our last recording an author by the name of Kelly Squirkin, and she's traveling giving Titanic talks now about leadership during crisis and examining, the decisions that are made. And we had a little conversation about, what would we do? And I think that's something that a lot of people, really dwell on. If I was on the ship as it was going down today, if we were in that situation, would we have acted any differently? Our first guest on this podcast was Cliff Ismay, who is a relative of obviously Bruce. And it's such a polarizing thing when you think about, did he do the right thing? If you take into account his testimony that the lifeboat was going down, he looked around, there was no one else around trying to get in, there were empty seats on the boat. Why not do the human thing and preserve your own life?
I'm actually really glad he did, because he had so much insight into what happened that we never would have known about. Like, he talked to Captain Smith. He was in the room when Thomas Andrews said the ship was going to sink. Like, his his firsthand perspective is something that we are actually really fortunate to have. And I think that's one of the reasons he gave, was like he wanted to be able to tell everybody what exactly happened. Um, so I don't fault him at all. I think he's been, the whole William Randolph Hearst thing, the smear campaign he did against him. I think that contributes a lot to his legacy, which is a shame. Um, because I don't think he really did anything wrong. It was the last lifeboat off the ship. There was no one else around. I'm sure everyone else had huddled further back stern, and he got in the lifeboat. So I mean, I never thought he did everything bad, and it's a shame that every single movie has depicted him as the mustache twirling, villain, when he really wasn't. It ruined
Yeah.
his life. I mean, he was already, before he was even like ruined, he was already a mess on the Carpathia. He was like locked away in solitude on the ship. He didn't want to talk to anybody. Like, he was obviously very affected by it before the whole villain thing even happened. So I kind of feel bad for him.
Yeah, imagine the PTSD and the guilt.
Yeah.
Ugh, can't. Are there any other characters on Titanic? Obviously, it's a treasure trove. It's rife with stories, as you mentioned. But any other passengers or crew members on Titanic whose story you're really drawn to specifically?
Uh, I'm going to give the cliche of Thomas Andrews, because as a kid, being obsessed with architecture, he was, the architect and the one in charge. So I was always drawn to him. Um, and I also really enjoy the story of Francis Brown, who took all the pictures. If he didn't get off the ship or never got on the ship, we would not have so many pictures that, of the ship, because it was never really well documented. So those two people, I was always really drawn to their stories.
Pretty much the only photos we have are the
Yeah,
Father
of the
Browns.
of the interiors, yeah, for sure.
So fortunate that he got off the ship. We're fortunate that Bruce Ismay got off the ship, because so much of this would be lost. And it's a big reason in this landscape of Titanic podcasts, why start another one was a question that was rolling around in my head when I wanted to do this. And I think, we're all doing really important work, which is keeping her legacy alive and telling her story. And as long as we continue to do that, as factually as we can, of course, the longer her legacy continues, and she continues to inspire creators like yourself. You have a few of your artwork right behind you for people to see who are watching the live stream here on YouTube, but we're going to share some more up close. We'll talk about each one, starting with, if I know how to do the Zoom technology thing, this one here. Can you describe for anyone who's just listening to the audio podcast what we're seeing here in this Greg DiNapolie sketch?
That's my most recent Titanic piece. I just did that last year. I just gotten back from Belfast. I went my wife and I went for our 15th anniversary to Ireland, and we spent the day in Belfast. And I got to stand basically right at that point, and the ship, the drawing depicts the Titanic leaving Belfast on their sea trials on April 2nd, and the East Twin Lighthouse, which is in some very famous photos of the Titanic, is also in the foreground. So standing in that spot and being a fan of lighthouses, and I wanted to make a composition that kind of combined my two loves. So I did a lot of research of the lighthouse, and I could basically used the famous photo of the Titanic sailing off into the distance and kind of combined them in my mind. And I drew it, and the drawing, the actual drawing, is right behind me here. So it took a lot of research and quite a bit of time. It's not the smallest drawing; it's about 2 feet wide. So yeah, pretty happy with the way it came out. This is my third Titanic piece.
I'm gonna have to pick your brain about your Belfast trip. I'll be there next week.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Bucket list trip for sure.
Oh,
And
definitely.
is this showing some video now of you shading one of the funnels?
That was my first Titanic drawing I ever did, which was pretty recently, only in 2021.
Oh, okay.
Um, I took it took me a lot of courage for me to act. There it is. That's the first one I ever did. Back in 2019, I actually went. We went to Ireland for a long weekend. It was my 40th birthday, and my wife said, "Where do you want to go?" And we had to do something. And you're turning 40, and I said, "I don't know. We can do a long weekend somewhere." And we talked about all these places, and I said, "You know what? I'd really like to go to see where the Titanic was built." And they got the museum that had just been opened or whatever. And so we went just for like 3 days. We went to Ireland. We did a lot of Dublin, and we took the day trip up to Belfast then. And that kind of brought it all back. That being in Belfast was unbelievable. The museum's great, but in my opinion, being in the spot and seeing all the stuff that you learn about your whole life is so much better than being in the museum. Like the museum's great. I'm not going to say it's not, but you're in a museum. You're in a dark rooms looking at stuff. Stepping outside and standing in the slipway and going across the street into the Titanic Hotel, which is the old Harland and Wolff offices, and standing in the drawing room where the plans were drawn by hand, and going a few steps into Thomas Andrews' office, and then going down the street to seeing the Thompson dry dock, where I mean it's a physical footprint of the ship. It's unbelievable. That kind of like seeing that to me was it just brought everything back. And when we got back, I mean COVID hit and everything. But then I was like, maybe I should try to draw it. I've never really drawn the Titanic in my adult life. I used to draw it in notebooks and stuff, but and then I had like a hard thing, like what, like it's like you with the podcast. What am I going to bring to the Titanic with another Titanic podcast? Like what am I going to add to the Titanic community doing another drawing of the Titanic? And I was a little nervous about it because the Titanic community can be a little picky about certain things. So like, what if I posted online and people rip it apart, and all the rivet counters out there? But I was so into it again after my trip that I decided to draw it, and I stayed pretty faithful to a photograph. I didn't really add anything to it. This was my first attempt. I was pretty happy with how it came out, and it did actually very well. I was very well received by everyone that saw it. So then I decided to do my own original composition, a much bigger drawing, which was the second piece I did. It's the one with the tugboat. I don't know if you have that one to show. Yeah, that one there. That one was completely made up by me. I researched all the tugboats that were in Southampton, and I kind of picked one and put it in the foreground. I made up the whole composition myself, and I really put a lot into that. That took about 8 months for me to draw because it's very big. It's the one to my right, your left on the screen. So it's about 26 inches high. It's pretty large. It's actually the largest drawing I've ever done. And that one I put everything into it, and I've had a lot of success selling prints of it, and it got a lot of likes and follows on Instagram. So I was very, very pleased with how that one came out.
It's amazing. And for anyone who's just listening, they look like black and white photographs. If you didn't see these videos of him actually doing the shading and the sketching, which I assume are probably on your Instagram as well, Greg
Yeah.
DiNapoli art.
Which during the Queen Mary's voyages was cabin A25. They renamed it when they converted the Queen Mary.
The shading is just incredible, so lifelike. Is that like a regular pencil that's like shaved down? It looks so interesting.
I mean, they're drawing pencils. They're not like number two pencils. They're drawing. I mean, but they're just graphite pencils. But what I do is I take a knife and I cut the wood casing away, and then I
Gotcha.
use a sandpaper and I sharpen it, just so you can use more of the side of the pencil to cover more areas, get more texture, and it also has the fine point for fine detail. So that's why we do that.
Fascinating. And is this a Q-tip you use for some of the shading on
That's a
the smokestack?
that's a Q-tip. They make great blending and drawing tools, believe it or not. Yeah,
Wow.
they make really soft edges for smoke and other things. Yeah, I've learned a few tricks.
Amazing. And I imagine each one is its own kind of beast as far as the time you put into it. But if you could estimate what kind of time commitment or how much time you spend just creating one of these, how many hours would you say?
Uh, the first one probably took 40 or so because it's a little smaller, doesn't have as much detail. The two bigger ones, the Belfast and the Southampton one, they're larger and they took well over 100 hours.
Wow. My father-in-law does colored pencil, much like yours. Like you think you're looking at a photograph, but the way he does it is he just goes in almost like pixels and just does tiny
Yeah,
dots, and it's fascinating. But it takes him about like a year to finish
yeah.
one.
Color pencil. I have a lot of respect for color pencil. That's hard.
Well, I mean, looking at your work, I can't imagine it's easy or a cakewalk at any stretch. But we, like you say, it's our passion project. We've got something inside us, in our hearts, that makes us want to create, want to put our free time into creating something inspired by Titanic, and it's what I wanted to examine through these conversations is what is it about Titanic that makes us want to continue to create, or that continues to inspire us. Now, as you mentioned in your earlier in our conversation, architecture has always been your number one love, and there are some amazing other. We'll take everyone through your website in just a second, but tell us about this. Is Empire State Building?
Yep, that's the Empire State Building. Like I said, I don't live too far from New York City, an hour and a half, depending on traffic. Empire State Building has always been one of my favorite buildings. It's the quintessential skyscraper, great example of Art Deco architecture. And I was in the city and I took a picture of the building just looking up because I thought it was a cool shot. And I brought it home. I was like, wow, that would actually make a pretty cool drawing. So that one took a really long time as well. And that one has been featured in Artist Magazine in their drawing competition, their international drawing competition. So I had some
Wow.
success with that one. That one took, like I said, a lot of windows to draw there. So that took quite a lot of time.
Yeah, I was wondering. So, do you use a straight edge, or is this all just your? You're
No,
just so
I
good.
cheat. I use a straight edge. Sometimes I don't, but when I have to get it, pretty precise, I do.
I mean, it would be really difficult to do the symmetry and all the lines of the windows and everything without, I
Yeah.
imagine. But just the detail on the spire at the top is incredible. So
Thank
well
you.
done.
Thank
And
you very much.
we've talked about your love for lighthouses. Which one is this?
This is the Staten Island Lighthouse. It's not very well known. It's in Staten Island, which is one of the boroughs in New York City. It's in a, oddly enough, it's in a very residential neighborhood. And it's like literally in people's backyards. So it doesn't get a lot of attention. It's just kind of there. Oddly enough, it was first lit on April 15th, 1912. So
Whoa.
right? Crazy, right? So if the Titanic had, made it, it would have been one of the first ships that lighthouse welcomed into the city. Um, but yeah, it's kind of in disrepair. They've been giving it a little more attention lately. The National Lighthouse Museum has kind of taking it under its wing and trying to give it some TLC. But I always thought it was a beautiful lighthouse. It has so many great architectural details. So I immediately wanted to draw it. And this has probably been my most successful piece. It's also been an artist magazine in their drawing competition. And it was also selected for their Derwent Art Prize. And for people that don't know, Derwent is a British art supply company. And every 2 years, they have this really big drawing competition. They encourage entries from all over the world. And this past year, they had 6,000 entries from 60 countries. And they picked 50 or 60 pieces for exhibition in London. And that piece was one of the 60 or so that were picked out of 6,000. So I was floored by that. And we made it a whole trip. My wife and daughter, we all went to London for the opening and got to see it abroad. So that was a great experience. It was also the first week of April, so it was kind of cool being in London on the anniversary of the Titanic arriving month. So
Oh my goodness. So many parallels, and
yeah,
congratulations on your well-deserved accolades and,
thank you very much.
recognition. If you're listening or if you're watching, I encourage you, as soon as you finish this episode, go to gregdinapoliillustration.com. You can see his gallery, the prints that are there. You can order and have one of these to hang up in your home. You can see the just like so much amazing work here. And I'm shocked. I mean, it blows my mind like that this is your hobby and not your full-time job. But as an artist, I know how difficult it is to make a living making your art. And as much as we can share this with the world, we will. Follow him on Instagram at Greg DiNapolie Art, and check out all of the cool stuff on his website, as I mentioned, gregdinapoliillustration.com. Before I go to Ireland, we're spending I think over a week, about 10 days there. We're going to do a big loop of the island. What do I need to do when I'm there?
Well, my last trip last year, we were there for a week and we did a lot of the island. We did day trips to like Cork, um, Galway. We did the Blarney Stones. If you can, I would suggest doing all that stuff. But as far as Belfast, uh, the slipway, the dry dock, Thompson Dry Dock, and the Titanic Hotel, I mean, it can't be missed. If you can grab lunch in the drawing room, because it's a bar now.
Yeah.
That's what we did. It's just so cool being there, and just they don't. I mean, we wandered around. We got all the offices behind the drawing rooms. The old offices are now conference rooms, but they are well marked, and it says like Thomas Andrews' office was here, and you can go upstairs to the presentation room where they used to present all the designs to their clients. So Captain Smith and Ismay, they were all standing in that room. Like it's crazy to actually be there for sure. Like I want to go back and actually spend a night or two in that hotel for sure.
I'm very much looking forward to it. We are spending a night there, so I'm thrilled.
Oh God, I'm so jealous.
Can't wait to step into Thomas Andrews' office and have a drink in the drawing room.
Yeah.
Just
They
cannot wait.
actually, when we were there, I don't know if they still do, but they had one of the cocktails that were served on the Titanic. So we had to have, I forget what its name was, but my wife and I had one of those. Pretty cool.
Did you have a chance to make it down to Cove? We had Dr. Michael Martin
No,
on a couple of
we're only
episodes
there.
ago.
I know. I didn't even know about it till I heard him on I think Titanic Talk and your podcast. And I have to go back and do that. We were only in Cork. We were there for like a tour, so I was only there for a few hours or whatever. So I didn't make it down to Cove or Queenstown as it used to be. But I really want to go. That would be so cool to see.
I'm so glad. Happy accident. We were going to split the trip between Ireland and Paris, and we were trying to figure out why lodging was so crazy in Paris at the time. And it's the Olympics. So we said, let's just stay in Ireland longer. So I'm
Yeah,
excited. There's so
good
much to do
choice.
and see. And before we say goodbye and wish you happy Titanic trails, do you have any lasting thoughts about Titanic and her legacy that you'd like to leave with our audience?
Um, I don't know. I just love the ship. I'm going to keep keep drawing it. There'll be more drawings of it in the future for me, and um, I hope everyone appreciates the ship and keeps it alive. Similar to how you're doing and other people are doing as well through their work, creativity. Um, it's just very important to keep its memory alive because it changed the world.
Absolutely. And thank you for your work and everything, every way, sharing it with us, and every way you continue to keep her legacy alive as well. One more time, his website is gregdinapoliillustration.com. His Instagram is Greg DiNapoli Art. And where else can anybody find you if there's anything else you can share?
That's pretty much it. I have a Facebook page also by the same Greg DiNapoli Art. But I mean, yeah, Instagram, Facebook, my website. That's about it.
And that's enough because it's all there for everyone to see. And thank you again, everybody. If you enjoyed listening to this conversation, please be sure you're subscribed to the Titanic Book Club newsletter and YouTube channel, of course. Links are in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate, subscribe, leave a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you love conversations with inspirational creators, you can find many more. They're not Titanic related, but they're over on my personal podcast, Cove Pod. Click over and give that a listen if you would. I want to say thank you one more time to our guest today, Greg DiNapoli. And thank you all for tuning in. Until next episode, let's continue to keep Titanic's legacy alive. Seize the day, follow your heart's fire, and make each day count.